Los Angeles, early 1951. Just off Sunset Boulevard. The room is warm in the way expensive rooms always are, low lights, polished wood, linen so white it almost glows. The noise from the street doesn't reach this far, doors like these are built for quiet. A waiter leans in, refills a glass, then disappears without being noticed. At the center of the table, a man finishes a joke. It's mild, safe, the kind of thing meant to ease tension without touching it. A line about how Washington and Hollywood are just different stages, same audience. Laughter moves around the table on schedule. Senator Kefauver laughs too. At first. Then he stops. The laugh dies before it reaches his eyes. His smile holds just barely while something else tightens in his face, an awareness that arrives a half-second too late to hide. Because he finally looks at the table. Not the people. The pattern. Who is seated where? Who is not across from whom? Who has been placed close enough to whisper, and who has been kept politely apart? The joke is over. But no one speaks yet. The silence is brief, polished, practiced. A silence that isn't awkward because everyone in the room understands exactly what it means. This dinner wasn't about peace. It was about control. Kefauver lowers his glass. He does not set it down fully. He keeps a hand on it as if grounding himself. His eyes move again, this time slower. A studio fixer sits at the head of the table. Not a famous name, not a star, the kind of man who exists one step behind recognition and prefers it that way. Tailored suit, calm posture, a smile that never quite commits. Two producers are seated to the fixer's right, both men who publicly claim they've never met. They have. A labor intermediary is 3 seats away, close enough to be acknowledged, far enough to avoid suspicion. Across from him, a former congressional aide who shouldn't be anywhere near Hollywood dinners, let alone this one. No introductions were made when they arrived. That wasn't an oversight. It was the point. Kefauver realizes that the seating chart has already done what witnesses often won't. It has told the truth quietly. Someone clears their throat, a second joke is offered, something about dessert, plates shift, the moment almost passes. Almost. Kefauver nods along, still smiling. He does not say what he has just understood, he does not need to. In rooms like this, saying it would only warn the wrong people. The studio fixer watches him carefully now, not suspicious, curious. The room resumes breathing. Wine pours, a fork taps porcelain, someone compliments the chef. The dinner continues because dinners always do. But the dynamic has changed. Kefauver asks a harmless question about a recent picture release. His tone is light, his interest appears casual. The answer he receives is too detailed, offered too quickly. Another note. He mentions a union issue back east. A producer answers instead of the union representative. Another note. Across the table, a man who has said nothing all evening finally speaks, and when he does, 2 others glance at him first, as if checking whether permission has been given. Kefauver nods again. This isn't testimony. It's better. The fixer raises his glass and proposes a toast. To cooperation, to clearing misunderstandings, to keeping things civil in an unnecessarily noisy moment. Everyone raises their glass. Kefauver does too. But his smile doesn't return this time. Because he understands something most hearings never reveal. Power doesn't argue in public. It arranges itself in private. The dinner lasts another 40 minutes, long enough to be polite, short enough to be forgettable. As chairs slide back and coats are collected, people leave in exactly the order you would expect if you knew what to look for. No one lingers. No one exchanges contact information, that's already been handled elsewhere. Outside engines start, doors close, the night absorbs them. Kefauver pauses by the exit. The fixer offers a final word, something gracious, something noncommittal. The senator listens, nods, thanks him for the invitation. Their handshake is brief. Firm. Clean. Meaningless. But as Kefauver steps out onto the sidewalk, the quiet feels different now. Not empty. Heavy. Back in his hotel room later that night, he sits at a desk with a single lamp on. No staff, no reporters, no recording devices. Just paper. He does not write names yet. He sketches positions. Who sat where? Who spoke when? Who didn't need to? He realizes that if this dinner were ever explained out loud, it would sound trivial. A courtesy meeting, an attempt at civility, nothing a headline would chase. But if drawn correctly, if treated not as a story but as a map, it could show something far more dangerous. Connections that never appear together in daylight. Influence that never signs its name. Fear that doesn't threaten, it coordinates. Somewhere else in the city, the fixer pours himself a drink and allows a moment of satisfaction. The dinner went well, no outbursts, no confrontations. The senator seemed receptive, reasonable. That's the risk with men like Kefauver. They rarely show you when they've learned something. They thank you. The next morning, newspapers run nothing, not a whisper. Hollywood wakes up convinced the evening dissolved harmlessly into memory. But the guest list does not disappear. It changes shape. And the most unsettling truth of that dinner is that a joke exposed something dangerous. It's that everyone at the table understood the danger before the joke was finished. And still they laughed. The following week moves quietly. Too quietly. Los Angeles keeps smiling, studio gates open and close on schedule, drivers wait with engines idling, publicists trade favors over lunch. If there's anxiety in the air, it stays indoors. In Washington, Est Kefauver takes his seat in a committee room that smells faintly of varnish and paper. The hearings are still days away. For now, there are memos, conversations, people stopping by without appointments. He does not mention the dinner. Not yet. That restraint is deliberate. Fear doesn't surface all at once. It ripples outward as people realize independently that something has shifted and that they don't know how much has already been seen. The first call comes from a studio attorney in New York, polite, congratulatory, curious about whether the senator enjoyed California. Kefauver thanks him and says very little. After the call ends, he makes a note. Not a name. A reaction. By midweek, a union intermediary cancels a previously scheduled appearance before the committee. No explanation, just a rescheduling request pushed weeks into the future. Another note. A producer who had planned to testify suddenly changes counsel. Another note. What is said doesn't matter as much as when it's said. The pressure is subtle, it never sounds like a warning. No one threatens, no one even argues. They adjust. That's the tell. In a private office in Beverly Hills, the fixer from the dinner reads a short memo twice. No names, just a reminder that certain appearances may not be productive at this time. He folds the paper carefully and locks it in a drawer. He hadn't planned on this. The dinner was meant to set boundaries, not redraw them, to show Washington that Hollywood understood the rules and preferred discretion. But discretion cuts both ways. Somewhere between dessert and coffee, the seating chart stopped being protection and became exposure. The fixer hosts no more dinners. That too was a decision. As the weeks progress, Kefauver's staff assembles material without fanfare. They do not subpoena the biggest names first. They don't announce sweeping inquiries. They invite minor figures, background players, people whose presence at the dinner felt odd but not incriminating. One at a time they listen. Witnesses talk around things, they avoid names they know better than to say out loud, but their pauses are consistent, their evasions align too cleanly to be coincidence. Kefauver doesn't interrupt. He watches. A studio accountant hesitates when asked about labor expenses that don't match paperwork. A former aide stares too long at the ceiling before denying contact with a producer he allegedly doesn't know. A publicist corrects herself mid-sentence, changing who suggested a meeting and why. None of these moments would hold up alone. Together they form shape. In Hollywood, whispers begin, not about the hearings, those are expected, but about how questions are being asked. People notice that the committee seems to know where not to look. Which doors not to open. Which only matters if someone knows what's behind them. A mid-level executive calls the fixer late one night, says nothing directly, mentions that things feel colder. The fixer replies calmly, says it will pass, suggests focusing on upcoming releases. When the call ends, he doesn't sleep. Because fear behaves differently once it senses recognition. It narrows, it sharpens. Men who once spoke freely around contracts now choose their words with care. Invitations are declined. Phone calls go unanswered longer than before. Everyone understands the reason without discussing it. Someone saw the pattern. And patterns are dangerous. Kefauver finally brings the dinner up, not in public, not in testimony. He references it casually in a closed session as an example of how influence travels without names attached. He does not accuse anyone. He doesn't need to. The room grows still in a way that feels familiar. Across from him, a witness recognizes the tactic instantly. Eyes flicker, breathing changes. He realizes that denying facts won't help if the question isn't about facts. It's about structure. Who arranged the meeting? Kefauver asks gently. The witness begins to answer, then stops, clears his throat, tries again. The second answer is shorter. That evening, word spreads, never in a single statement, never formally, that the committee is less interested in crimes than in alignment. In who sits near whom, in who speaks for whom without being named. This is not the fight Hollywood prepared for. Scandals can be buried, witnesses can be discredited, headlines move on. But the dinner doesn't go away. It lingers as a reference point, a private moment that refuses to stay contained, not because it's dramatic but because it was accurate. The fixer understands this too late. He considers reaching out, then doesn't. Any contact now would only confirm things better left implied. Silence, once a shield, has become an admission. Weeks later, a junior staffer brings Kefauver a neatly organized folder. Inside are diagrams, not literal seating charts, but close. Visuals showing where interests overlap, where money flows, where voices change. Kefauver studies them without comment. He thinks of the joke at the table, the way everyone laughed because laughing was safer than noticing what sat inches away. He understands something then that politics doesn't often teach. Power rarely denies wrongdoing convincingly. It prefers proximity, to be close enough to shape outcomes without appearing involved. That's what the dinner revealed. Not guilt. Relationship. As hearings continue, some people cooperate faster than expected, others withdraw entirely, careers stall without explanation, projects quietly lose funding, a few names vanish from credits, never officially blacklisted, just uninvited. Fear doesn't require instruction when it recognizes itself. One night, alone in his office, Kefauver revisits his notes from the dinner. He realizes he hasn't added to them since that first night. He doesn't need to. Everything that follows traces back to those placements, those pauses, that smile that didn't last. The most damaging evidence wasn't hidden. It was poured wine past bread and silence shared comfortably. And now, every time a witness hesitates, every time a call goes unanswered, the meaning returns with clarity. They know the map exists. They just don't know how much of it has been drawn. The hearings never explode. That's the part history forgets. There is no single day when Hollywood panics, no dramatic collapse, no front-page confession that rewrites the industry overnight. What happens instead is slower and far more effective. Things drift. A studio delays a project without explanation. A producer finds himself no longer returning calls he once answered instantly. A union figure retires earlier than planned, citing health no one questions. None of it is dramatic enough to protest. That's the design. From the outside, the Kefauver committee appears disciplined, almost restrained. Questions are framed carefully. Accusations are implied, not declared. When a witness contradicts himself, Kefauver lets the silence work instead of the gavel. He has learned not to chase outrage. Outrage gives people something to fight. Silence gives them something to fear. Privately, Kefauver understands that the dinner has already done its job, not as proof, not as leverage, but as orientation. It showed him how power organizes itself when it thinks no one is looking. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. In Lowe's Angels, the fixer from the banquet recedes from view, not disgraced, not arrested, just less present. He still has lunch with the same people, still attends premieres, still smiles when appropriate. But he no longer arranges rooms. Others do now. Men who watched what happened and understood the lesson: proximity is riskier than secrecy, better to keep distance, better to fragment influence than display it. The table is never set that way again. Years later, researchers will argue over how effective the hearings truly were. They'll debate outcomes, legislation, statistics. Some will call Kefauver idealistic. Others will say he underestimated the system he challenged. Both will miss the point, because the real victory or defeat was psychological. Hollywood learned that it could no longer assume its private spaces were invisible. Washington learned that influence leaves a residue you can follow if you stop looking for crimes and start looking for comfort. Who sits easily together? Who speaks without caution? Who believes the room belongs to them? Kefauver doesn't give interviews about the dinner. He never references it publicly. He doesn't need to. Its value was never rhetorical. It was structural. Near the end of his term, a junior aide asks him carefully whether there was ever a moment when he knew a line had been crossed, a point where he understood Hollywood wasn't just defending itself but coordinating. Kefauver thinks for a long moment. Then he answers quietly. At the dinner, he says, when everyone laughed. The aide waits for more. There isn't any. Because that's all there is to it. Laughter is confirmation. Silence is agreement. Seating is strategy. The aide thanks him and doesn't ask again. Years pass. The dinner fades from memory not because it was unimportant, but because it worked too well. No one benefits from remembering rooms where truth revealed itself without saying a word. Studios adapt, politics moves on, power learns new manners. But the pattern remains. In archives, memos survive without context. Seating arrangements look meaningless on paper. Phone records show nothing improper. History, if read casually, finds nothing to condemn. Only if you know how to look. Only if you understand what that pause meant after the joke. Do the pieces realign? And that is the most unsettling part. The system didn't collapse. It corrected itself. Quietly. To this day, the most dangerous decisions in American history rarely announce themselves in speeches or hearings. They happen around tables. With wine. With laughter that ends half a second too soon. And if you don't notice the moment it stops, you never realize what the room just agreed to.